It's flying by. We are going to start with, well, we don't have, let's start with, there you go. And goodbye.
Goodbye, Kenny.
And Ken Watson's leaving the room because there's been a fire call. So there you are.
Bye, Ken.
Sean, I guess we're going to go right to budgets. And what I'd like to hear, if it's okay with you, is start the reverse. Emergency management, what changes there are there?
Well, that's something we should talk about.
Okay.
The mayor convened a meeting and led a conversation amongst the fire chief was present, the police chief, fire marshal, and excuse me, not the fire chief, it was Mike Kennedy was here on behalf of the fire company. I was trying to remember who was sitting right there, so give me a second. I attended and the mayor orchestrated the meeting. We were talking about emergency management coordination, emergency management operations, and what that is organizing the deployment of resources, human and capital resources, in the event of protracted emergencies, and those can take various forms. Not all emergencies involve an EMC, emergency emergency coordination. That only gets activated when things are lasting typically more than half a day. So weather-related events, any sort of massive disruption of normal operations is your trigger for that to start to operate. And
We're starting with emergency management.
the process to as I understand it, the state requires all local jurisdictions to have this function in there to do it. Essentially, the state orders us to do this and to appoint an emergency management coordinator, and that's done through an action of council where the nomination is sent to the governor's office and that gets approved. And that was done. We had Dave Wurtzel, and he got some assistance from Holly Von Farrell, and the two of them were able to look at our emergency management plan and bring it up to speed at the end of 18. But Dave didn't do that with any intentions of sticking around to be the coordinator. Dave has other things to do, and Dave has.
So out of that, we did get a plan. We were back at certification. We met the standard and had someone representing us to the state.
Yeah.
So whereas prior to that, we were not, shall we say, on
part of that we still had a plan.
Right.
It was still getting reviewed annually and approved by the county. But that was how that was getting done, and who was looking at it, and who understood emergency management. That's a whole different question. I don't know the answer to. Early 2019, Dave resigned his post, so council needs to nominate to the governor's office a new emergency management coordinator.
Sure.
Now, while the mayor has powers to declare an emergency, the mayor is not the de facto EMC, but she's taken an interest in managing this conversation. So I bring it up in the context of budget because two things need to happen. We need to identify the person who is going to be the EMC. And then we need to support that person because there's certain training that person has to get in the first year, and then and by the end of the third year, the person's supposed to get even more training. And it's not all about having a good plan in place and having the certifications. This is an active role that this person has to play. This person has to drill, train, work with the operational heads, that would be fire, police, and ambulance. And we've been partnering with Narberth Ambulance, and coordinate emergency responses and go over that and actively do it. So it's not something we can just appoint somebody and just call it a day. And it sits around, because really it's about preparedness and how
Yeah.
are you going to be prepared. So we have not identified who that person is going to be. My name was bandied about. If that's the direction council wants to go in, there would have to be some other reorganization of my duties and responsibilities, because this is a pretty significant piece. I've started to ask around other municipalities in Montgomery County how they do it, who does it, how does it work. So I'm doing I'm already spending time on it.
Yeah. Well, Holly was the second. Holly Bonfarro was second to Mr. Wurtzel. Have we approached her, had a conversation with her? Was she included in that meeting?
No, she wasn't.
So I think that's probably, in my opinion, unless, of course, we go around the room and others object, but I think we should start there at the very least, purely as a courtesy. And then if she declines, then we can move on from there. But I think she has been in the mix a while, and we owe her that respect. Just allow her the position to say yay or nay.
And to be clear too, a lot of places do this with a volunteer.
Yeah.
But it has to be somebody who wants to take the time, a multi-year approach to doing the job.
Sure.
It's not just a title. It's
you actually have to do the work.
It's actually some real on the ground kind of functional planning and identifying resources, putting it together, running drills and training, keeping everybody up to speed on how we are going to handle certain situations. Now we have sort of a de facto emergency management response in place because we've been plowing streets for decades, so we know how to handle major snowstorm events. But that is, and we work to write down standard operating procedures and expectations on how the Public Works Department and fire and police all cross-communicate during those events. So we're already kind of doing it to address the things that come up, but emergency management is about being prepared for the black swan.
Right.
What happens when it rains 14 inches in 24 hours? That could happen.
Or 3.5 inches in an hour.
Or 3.5 inches in 30 minutes.
Flood. Right, exactly. And your streets flood. Right.
Or what if we have a gas main break and a fire? What if we have a fire that involves multiple structures?
Right.
Yeah. And now
you have locations.
And now you have different, and you're trying to cross-coordinate multiple responses to the area. We need to figure out how to do that and have a plan in place to manage those larger events, which we have a plan, but we don't have the
leadership piece.
Kind of the functional doing part of it.
Right. Got it. So what? So as far as the budget goes, is there any kind of? I don't even think we've put dollars in for this, other than
it would be training.
Yeah.
Would be my focus in the short term.
That's all I remember for when we asked Dave to jump on board. We just said go to the training and we'll figure that out. But I think that I don't remember it being an exorbitant amount of money. I think it was more time than money. And if there's additional training or additional coordination, anything like that, obviously we would just need a number. I don't think it's something that we can ignore, and I don't think it's something that we would want to ignore. It's probably better to have.
No.
Sean, if you'll speak with Holly, and then we'll go back.
Yeah, this has always been kind of on my to-do list, but
I know your to-do list is long, my friend.
It's on the deck circle for forever.
Yeah.
And so, how can we coordinate with Lower Merion on that? Like, could you imagine if, say, we had someone like Holly or someone else, would they be coordinating with the Lower Merion?
Absolutely, yeah.
Volunteer or staff person?
Maybe
on a regular basis.
I don't know who the EMC is in Lower Merion Township, but that would be the first point of contact, and then there probably would have to be some joint conversations with that EMC and Lower Merion Superintendent of Police. They have a full-time fire department head, fire department chief. Yeah. Charles McGreevy, the township. Yeah. No relation.
I should know.
McGarvey.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. No relation. And also across to the private sector with Dartmouth Ambulance.
I mean, it seems like if if Holly decides not to, take on this role, that the volunteer fire department, other first responders would be natural kind of.
There are some limits within what's allowed, who's allowed to coordinate, because if they're off on a call somewhere else, there's nobody here at Command Central. So it's about a coordination piece. Yes, obviously they're involved and they're engaged, but it's about who's going to actually coordinate all the pieces, which is why we had Wurtzel do it.
But wasn't he?
No, he had resigned his position at the fire department.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, about a year or prior, he had resigned his position at the firehouse.
Okay.
And so we said, well, could you do this position for us?
All right, so it has to be someone who's not an active.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So speak with Holly and we'll see what she says, and then whatever the dollar amount is, obviously for the training, if we can predict out 2021, whatever it is.
Now I'm sorry, but just to press rewind a tad, that's not a barrier.
Right.
Okay.
It's to appointing somebody in the fire company.
Yeah.
It could be your EMC. They just would have some.
It can't be your chief, I know that.
Shouldn't be your chief.
Like it states, like can't be the chief.
Shouldn't, really, because
Laura Marion, their superintendent, is their EMC.
Yes, right, which is
superintendent
McGrath.
Police.
McGrath, right. So, so we have options, obviously.
Okay.
So we have a lot of options.
So it could be
Yeah.
part of John's role. I mean, there are possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And John's fighting the same issue I am, where it's like, where does it fit on his plate?
Yeah.
Clearly John is like, in terms of knowledge, way up here, and I'm the borough manager's way down here.
Right. Well, let's give it a roll.
That doesn't mean you can't get training.
That's right. It doesn't mean you can't get there. All right. So if you'll speak with Holly, and then we'll get some numbers, and we can talk about it next month. Mm-hmm. And then you want to talk about the fire department next?
Oh, where is the emergency response manual? Is that somewhere public? Like, is that on the borough website, or is it?
It's not public because some of the resources, names, and phone numbers, and all that. Aren't public, but we keep a hard copy in the office, and I have it on. I have Word docs of it.
There could be a public document that could be made, could be out there, outward facing, but the document.
Okay. Not allowed. Fire department, sorry.
Fire department, and Ken, I don't know what you might want to add to this, but, or I don't know if Fran or Bill have involved you in the conversations, but we did send out at the end of September our form of making a budget request that put in the borough's support for the fire company. That includes firefighter salaries, workers' comp, general liability, some computed cost share of capital and operating expenses for the building, because we're really unique in the county in that we have our fire company in the municipal building. Most of them are separate. So all of those buildings and facilities costs are shared, and we just did that on a square footage cost share basis, the garage plus the wing over there. It's roughly about 40% of the total square footage of the building is fire company dedicated. So if we spend 10 grand, for instance, on utilities, we made an assumption we were spending 4 grand on utilities for the fire company.
Pardon me.
So all that has gone to the fire company. We've asked for and given some deadlines for the reply. We're still in that period where it's not due yet. I haven't been contacted by Fran or Bill about any questions. I presume they're moving on pace to figure that out.
They're looking into it.
Good.
So they want to keep it on schedule. Mm-hmm. So they have updated me. They have included me. So all I can say is, we'll get it on time for you guys.
Good. And the good news, I guess, that with the workers' comp, we did get a little bit of a break. So we're coming back down.
Good.
We were around a little over 48,000 in 2018, and 2020 is going to be around 46,000 for both volunteer and paid firefighter workers' comp insurance. Right. And that's in a very difficult climate of headwinds with the Cancer Presumption Act, Act 46.
Act 46.
which has made it much more expensive and difficult to insure
And to find an insurer.
volunteer firefighters. In fact, there really is no more private
Nope.
insurer of volunteer firefighters. It's all going through the state now. So we were really one of the last that were doing it through.
Right, yeah, we were
private
lucky that way,
insurance
right?
company.
Sean, there was a loan that the borough took from the fire department, and that we were about to repay that? When
Yeah,
it was finished?
Yeah, when I took over as borough manager in 2016, it wasn't long after that I had a conversation and some correspondence with Bill Henderson Sr. There were some transactions that were documented between borough manager and fire department where dollars were taken from the fire equipment fund used for solid waste or general fund or capital fund purchases and then repaid back into the fire equipment fund. This year, $30,000 and change, $30,513, retires all of those obligations. There were actually 3 obligations running through 16, 17, 18, and 19, and 19 was our last pay back into the fire equipment fund. And I just politely mentioned to Bill in my reply that this is a practice we're not going to engage in anymore, just for bookkeeping sense. Like the fact that we had to figure it all out with letters back and forth is just not clean. Now the fire equipment fund is a joint savings account purposed for capital expenditures for the fire company, and I say it's a joint because deposits over the years, and I can't tell you, I don't have a full record of it, so I can't tell you how much, but I know under my tenure, the borough has made contributions to the fire equipment fund, and the fire company has made contributions, so there's intermingling of dollars in this fund that sits in a borough account with the Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust, or PLGIT, and you see that every month on our cash fund balance report. You'll see in our capital fund a thing called capital fund, which is just dollars that can go to any general capital fund purpose. We have about $350,000 in there as of today, and then the fire equipment fund is a sub account of the capital C capital fund, and that has roughly about $550,000 in it. Keeping in mind, we just purchased a $500,000
Fire
truck, so that's
there you have it.
really one of the better funds that are in better shape.
Right. Ken, is there anything you want to add?
The only thing we do have is it is Fire Prevention Week. Tonight is our plus we do have a lot of school kids coming into the firehouse this month too for tours and education on fire safety. About 300 kids coming in. So that's what's going on with the firehouse right now.
There you go. So if you're, what time? Say it again.
7 o'clock tonight.
7 o'clock, come on down. Get to look at the firehouse and the fire trucks, and I'm sure there'll be some sort of treat involved. Find out better.
Yeah, that's always a nice time.
It's always there.
The kids have a good time.
Mr. Anybody have any other questions for the fire department? If you'd like to take a look at the calls, that's the report we get. Next up, we'll talk about the police department. I know that John submitted his report as well online, and then.
Yeah, John is meeting with Matt and I at the end of this week. He's on vacation today, and we hope to get the rest of the discretionary line items in the 2020 operating budget from him.
Right.
Most of the expenditures in the police department are payroll and healthcare and pension. That accounts for the lion's share of that $1.8 million, and those are pretty much unaffected by, we don't have discretion, a great deal of discretion over those things. In fact, with the salary and wages, we're still in the midst of settling a contract. Our contract expired 12/31/18. We've been negotiating with the union since last October. It's been almost a year now. The present negotiations are in arbitration. We're seeking a timely resolution of that matter so that we can put more clear numbers into our 2020 budget. In the absence of that clarity, we make certain assumptions going forward, that there will be some kind of an increase in salary, that there will be some kind of, we don't know what healthcare is going to look like next year, but we just put some assumptions into the draft budget, which I'll go over with everyone next Wednesday. There will be a lot of me talking at you and giving you the entire draft budget composed as a whole, so you'll get a sense of kind of where it's sort of like when you're flying back to Philadelphia, it's sort of like you're down, you got to put away your electronic devices. You're below 10,000 feet. You know, that's about where we're at in the budget process right now. We're getting ready for landing. So we'll have those numbers shored up from the police department. We'll also have those numbers shored up from the Public Works Department. We're going to make some assumptions about library and fire because we don't have final numbers from those two. But we should have the budget kind of stuck all together. So we are having conversations about how revenue and expenses are out of balance or in balance and what things are changing. Now, nothing's changing operationally with the police department. We're going to have 5 officers next year, a chief. There will be a parking controller, and there is some reshuffling of the crossing guard. I gave John a kind of a budget target to hit, which is slightly in tune and slightly less than what we had budgeted for crossing guard wages last year. So I said, however you want to do it, how many hours, this is sort of your hourly limit for the year. It's around 750 hours. Make it work. If you want to hire 750 crossing guards and have them out there for 1 hour, you can do that. That's insane, but however he wants to do it. And we did discuss adding a location on North Narberth Avenue on the north side of St. Margaret's, but only doing so in concert with a conversation with St. Margaret's to say, are you willing to contribute some amount of money to this service? Because we already have one crossing guard posted at Windsor and North Narberth Avenue, and
the borough pays for that position solely.
And we didn't cook this idea up ourselves because our other permanent crossing guard position is at Rockland and Narberth Ave.
Chestnut.
Yeah. It is Chestnut.
Which is
It's over there.
I was like, just having a problem right now.
Good morning.
Yeah.
What just happened? What side?
So there is an agreement in place with the school district that whatever hours that the borough, whatever dollars the borough pays in a school year for that position to be filled, the district will reimburse the borough 50 cents on the dollar. So at the end of the school year, we send them a payroll report. They send us a check.
Sure.
Typically about $3,000.
It's those kinds of partnerships we'd like to see with the preschools or with St. Margaret's. It's those kinds of relationships because we do have a number of preschools. We have a number, of parents picking up and dropping off throughout the day, half days here, this, that. And so it's better when we're working together and that we can come up with some kind of a plan as opposed to playing sort of a whack-a-mole like St. Margaret's this year, Narberth Pres this year, and 201 next year. And we just sort of need a broader perspective. And I think it would be great if we could have those conversations with the schools as John is doing in order to create partnerships like we have with the Lower Merion School District. My humble opinion. Anything on that?
Well, can I ask more broadly on police?
You can do whatever you'd like.
Okay, so I guess you're gonna give us more detail next week. But what would be the rough ballpark percentage of the police budget that goes to the pension? That's kind of like a fixed. I mean, I guess none of those numbers. We don't have much control over any of those numbers, really.
Of the pension numbers, no.
But is the pension 40% of the total budget?
Total budget of the department.
Of the department, or
10% or 20%. Well,
I'm just
give me a
curious.
chance to look.
Or you can tell us next week. But
sure.
And then I'm also thinking about the percentage. What percentage is the police budget of the total budget?
Sure.
About 26% goes of the police budget goes to the pension, and about 42 to 45% of the overall general fund budget goes to police.
Okay.
42 to 45 is the total.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that? No? Maybe? Maybe.
Well, I mean, for equipment purchases, that's, those are things that were already discussed by council earlier this year, right? The police equipment purchases for next year and
Yeah.
upcoming, okay, so those have already been.
Sure.
kind of
Yeah,
sorted out.
anything that's durable, lasts more than a year, and costs more than $2,500, we push into the capital plan, capital plan and budget cycle. And then minor equipment purchases that we buy durable things that last more than a year through the operating budget, but they have to be lower cost. I mean, they have to be under $2,500. So laptops,
Right. I couldn't.
you name it.
Yeah, yeah, all of those things.
So basically what you're working on right now is the sort of the non-capital portion of the budget, is that right? More or
Precisely.
less? Okay.
Yeah, and this is the part of this is kind of the, it's not kind of, it is.
It is.
Budget most of your constituents are going to be able to wrap their heads around, because it's directly tied to their tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the
Right.
capital plan is more, plan and budget is sort of indirectly tied to the tax rate. So if we have to borrow more and more money to fund the capital plan, yeah, sure, it's going to feed back into our operating.
Oh, right, because these have to come out of current, these can't come out of,
Nope.
we can't borrow for
Nope.
this part of the budget. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
So, yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's always the question. is
Money's
how
all fungible, but it's
No,
not.
it's
Okay.
not. No,
In this
it's
case, it's
not.
not. Okay, got it, thank you.
So, which is why, and I have always said, and people are tired of me saying it, that budget creep is in this particular sector of the budget, police, fire, and emergency management, the creep is what you have to look out for, because someone will come into the room and say like, well, we did this emergency happened, and now we have to replace this. And so you have to be really careful with how much of the this, and this you're spending right up front, or throughout the year, or an emergency, or we didn't realize this had expired and now we have to come back and get something else. It's the creep. That has always been my concern. Everybody likes new stuff. We all agree with that. But we have to be very careful, because it's the public's dollars, and if you're providing public safety, you have to be very careful with where you're putting your money forward.
Can I go back briefly to the fire department?
Sure.
So, how much in general the fire department is funded by the borough, and how much is sort of its own funding source? Because you were saying that the equipment fund is partly funded by the fire department, but I thought basically it was all coming from the borough.
That's part of what we're trying to clarify with the way we want to do operating budgets going forward, and that's baked into the form and the information that we've requested from the fire company. Sort of say, well, what are you spending that we don't know about? Like how much fuel are you using to go out on calls? How much minor equipment gets used up? How much? What are you paying? Are you paying anything for training? How much does that cost? Like, what is the overall picture? We don't have an overall picture of fire company operations. What we have is a really good idea of what the borough does to support fire company operations.
And what's required. But there's also some requirements that come from the state.
And then there's the other kind of elephant in the room, and that is that we're supporting the Narberth Fire Company significantly, and majority of their calls are happening in the township. So where is the township's support for the Narberth Fire Company? How is that factored into the equation?
Right. I mean, you have to
report. That's a bigger kind of fundamental.
4 were in the borough out of that list.
It's a bigger fundamental question that I think I would love to partner with the Narberth Fire Company on and get a solution that kind of works for both parties.
Right.
So I guess the answer is we're not really sure.
We're not really sure, and I think that's hopefully we'll get more information this year about.
Yeah. We know what we're putting into the fire equipment fund. We know what we're putting into the comp. We know what those requirements are. But unlike the police budget, which is very detailed, we need a more detailed picture coming from the fire department.
Okay.
And there's certain, It's not to say it's not organized. I think the fire company is really paying attention to its equipment needs and replacing tires and hoses and breathing apparatus and rollout gear, and they know when those costs are coming home to roost. They have an idea, and would just like to get that information more clear, both in the operating budget, but also in the capital planning budget too. Like when we just bought a $500,000 fire truck, okay, and it replaced a 35-year-old truck. So what does the replacement cycle look like for all capital items in the fire company? And is there enough dollars in the fire equipment fund? And then it lends itself to other conversations: is can we get funding partnerships, assistance, grants to help?
What does that look like?
What does that look like? How do we help with that? All questions.
All questions.
All good questions,
All
I think.
questions. As I said, we have both reports. Is there anything else either anyone would like to ask or go over today before we call it even?
And just an update too on
Sure.
the matter that was brought up last week with the bridge and the recommendations that you brought in. Those were forwarded to the traffic engineer, and we have a call scheduled for tomorrow to get his 411 on that stuff.
Okay.
So we may be in a position next Wednesday to, as a council, to act on that.
I think what I'll do is I'll update everybody on John's feedback as soon as I get it.
So next month, and we can certainly, I'd like to go back over some of that ticket data. I have some questions, some parking data that we're able to get out of the new system. So I did come up with a couple more questions, so I'm sure it's not anything shocking to you, but just what I thought should be presented maybe in a clearer fashion. I think that's it. That's all we have. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And we're finished the public safety meeting. Thank you. We are adjourned.